The soldiers were spotted 2 hours after midnight, walking down all the main roads to Tiananmen Square. Immediately, the whole area sprang to life, hundreds of people swarming towards them. Unarmed, many in shirt sleeves, the soldiers had been ordered to encircle Tiananmen and wait for armed police to clear the students away. They found themselves confronted by indignant, then angry people who blocked their way, pushing and shoving, with some scuffles and fistfights. It was not, though, in any way a riot. The atmosphere was not one of panic or hysteria. It was all very measured but forceful. Eventually, the soldiers had to retreat. A shambling affair, with no one apparently giving orders, and many of the youngsters unclear about what they should do. In retreating, they were applauded. "You've been cheated by the government," they were informed. At dawn, students seemed in control of the area, manning checkpoints, and with more buses blocking the roads, driven there by workers. There was also more army equipment abandoned by the soldiers in their retreat. Many of them were still near the square, squatted around, dejected, having lost face. By rush hour, Peking's main street was in chaos. Buses blocked the roads to Tiananmen Square, their tires let down. Thousands of cyclists wriggled and plodded their way to work, and more gathered in impromptu meetings all over the city centre.
Good evening. Tanks and troops are patrolling the streets of central Peking after the bloody operation to crush student-led protests. Some reports say more than 2,000 civilians were killed in last night's army assault on Tiananmen Square.
The first move came. A lone armoured personnel carrier weaved its way around Tiananmen Square, establishing for the first time in 3 weeks an effective government claim to the place. But it was a near-run thing. The demonstrators were too numerous and too confident, and the vehicle was lucky to get away with it. Another followed soon after, and right from the start it seemed less likely to succeed. The crowd's blood was up, and its hatred for the authorities was all the more intense after the pacifism people have been showing here for weeks. The driver of the vehicle ran out of luck fast. Once he was stuck, the crowd had him, and the half-dozen soldiers inside virtually at their mercy, though the armour resisted their efforts for a long time. Soldiers had to get out or die from fire, even though the alternative was possible death at the hands of the wild, uncontrollable crowd. But not everyone had yielded to the violent hatred. A group of students took the considerable risk of bringing up a bus to shelter one of the soldiers from the mob. They fought the crowd for possession of his life, and finally they managed to get him on board. But it wasn't enough. The lust for blood was such that people poured onto the bus to get at him, though it seems he survived. Diehards among the students had chosen to take up their position around the monument in the middle of the square. All we could hear and see of their fate was the tracer bullets and the sound of heavy guns used against them. The army, ignoring the burning buses which served as barricades, was implacable. They moved in on the square from several directions, including the Forbidden City itself. Soon the soldiers had cleared the main east-west avenue that runs through Tiananmen Square, cleared it by the deliberate use of random firepower. The statue to democracy, erected in the last week of the students' occupation of the square as a symbol of their aspirations, has been entirely destroyed.
The bicycle rickshaws scooped up the injured. Others were shunted onto bikes and pedaled to hospital. Many were carried away by frantic local residents. Ambulances screamed up to the troop line and were turned away. They couldn't get to the square. 2 ambulance drivers were shot and injured. Earlier, we'd been driving at the back of the Forbidden City, the old part of Peking, near the square. We picked up a woman with a bullet in the head and took her to the nearby children's hospital, into a scene of near mayhem. Casualties were arriving every few seconds, on bikes, rickshaws, park benches, carried in, all with gunshot wounds. The operating theatre was overflowing, many of the staff in tears. In 20 minutes, 40 seriously injured were brought for emergency surgery. 2 were already dead.
The daylight hours have seen more violence, with young people still determined to show their defiance, facing the lines of troops and tanks. On the main road east of the square at 10:23 this morning, there was a sudden and deadly volley from the troops. The crowd ran, and bodies were left lying in the road. The lines of troops across the entrance to the square regrouped as the injured were raced away on any available transport. The burnt-out vehicles and signs of battle were not confined to this area. Crossroads around this vast city have wrecked vehicles, broken glass, pools of blood. Half an hour later, again with no reason or warning, the troops opened fire again. Between 30 and 40 people were killed by the 2 volleys. And all day, reports have come in that the main Peking University, Beida, on the city's outskirts, has had troops on the campus. They've been searching everywhere and beating and killing.